This is a 1991 Range Rover Vogue SE napping elegantly under the glow of the sun. In a high-end garage somewhere in the land of the free. And that man beside it? Oh, that's George, a brave fellow who's about to take on the monumental challenge of restoring it. But before then, here's a quick backstory about the vehicle. So, George's uncle paid big bucks for this beauty the very year it rolled off the production line. Since then, it's done literally everything from traveling on ferries to tackling muddy terrains and facilitating family ski trips to the Alps. Altogether, it has racked up over 210,000 miles of loyal service. But now, it's not the same vibrant vehicle it used to be. The engine is tired from all that hard work of yesteryears, and the body has suffered terribly from past repair jobs that didn't meet proper standards. And now all that legacy, all that mess, rests squarely on George's shoulders. Can he bring it back to life? Or is this Range Rover too far gone? The challenge of this restoration is quite complex. I say that because, aside from the issues I highlighted earlier, George is a novice restorer. He doesn't have the years of experience that's ideally required to execute such a big project. And to make things worse, he's operating a shoestring project. No fancy workshop, no high-end equipment, and definitely no overpriced OEM parts. Just grit, a dream, and whatever basic tools he could find. Still, George wasn't backing down. He rolled up his sleeves, got to work, and all of a sudden, bolts spun off like soda caps, panels dropped like autumn leaves, and this Range Rover Vogue SE started coming apart, piece by piece. George was flying through the teardown, which is impressive for someone new to the game. Yet with every part he removed, a new defect reared its ugly head. But he didn't flinch. As soon as he yanked off the left rear tire, he dove straight into repairing the chassis, patching up damaged body panels, and reviving rusted metal bits that looked like they'd been dragged through a salt mine. Now, I know I said George was a rookie, and technically that's true, but right now I have doubts. I mean, he's welding like he's got a PhD in fabrication from Harvard, his welds are clean, and his focus is laser sharp. But he has to keep this form going because the journey ahead is a marathon. At some point, the process became so intense that George had to rip off some tires just to access the grimy, hard-to-reach underbody. But once everything cleared out, it was time for more welding, more fabrication, and a fresh round of fine-tuning. That round of work was quite serious and very much needed, but it was by no means conclusive. With the underfloor now partially restored, this old Vogue SE was finally starting to look like it had a future on the open road. George took a step back, studied the rear, and sensed something was up. So what did he do? Yeah, you guessed right. he declared another round of fixes. This is slowly becoming a damage discovery adventure. Literally every bolt and panel George removed seems to lead him to more problems. That's the kind of stuff that breaks people's resolve, especially when they are newbies. But this guy is built differently. George was clearly doing his best while trying to get through every task as quickly as he could. But despite his intensity and speed, the chassis still looked like a mess. Now he had a choice: cut corners and hope the rusted frame holds up once everything's reassembled, or face the monster head-on. He went for the latter. It wasn't quick, and it definitely wasn't easy. But George made sure every square inch of that chassis got the full VIP treatment. He scrubbed, patched, and smoothed out years of damage with the focus of a surgeon and the patience of a monk. Next on the hit list, the rear axle and shocks. Once that was completed, it was time to show the axle some long overdue love and attention. Next, he turned back to the chassis for a few more touches, and then he slotted right back where it belonged. And you already know it's time for the tires to come on. George is probably thinking the worst is behind him, and to some extent that's true. But there was still a lot more to be done. With no time to waste, George knocked out a few rapid-fire installations, then it was back to active repair service, just like he never left. He kicked things off with the wiring harness, and once that was sorted, he moved on to the brake calipers, locking in safety and performance with each bolt. To be honest, George has overachieved so far. With barely any professional experience and the most basic tools imaginable, he's already brought about 70% of this classic Range Rover back from the brink. But the remaining 30% might just be the hardest part. I'm talking thick layers of dust, stubborn rust, and components that look like they haven't seen daylight in decades. Well, he has crushed every challenge so far, and there's no reason to think this one will be any different. He's off to a great start here. Now let's see if he can crown it all with a stunning finish. George is showing absolutely no signs of slowing down. His focus is superb, but his dedication and effort are even more impressive. It's exactly what you want to see from a restorer who's about to tackle hardline components like the doors of a vehicle that's riddled with dust. Next, he moved over to the interior to execute more repairs. As soon as he was done with that, he proceeded to mock install the doors. And then it was time for more repairs and installations of components. All right, enough of the heavy lifting, it's time to light this car up with some paint. The process was going all well, but just when I thought George was rounding up, he found a few other rusted spots. He tackled them head-on and carried out a few installations, bringing this project closer to the finish line. Then, he decided to check on the dashboard. First, he took everything apart from the stereo system to the wiring harness. Then, he began the actual rebuild. Speaking about rebuilds, George has spent a lot of time dismantling, repairing, and reconstructing the components of this car, and it's about time he started putting them back together. that round of intense restorative work completed, you get a feeling that the big reveal is just around the corner. But before then, how about we take some history lessons about this car? So, the 1991 Range Rover Vogue SE wasn't just any SUV. It was a top-tier luxury model in Land Rover's original lineup. Back then, most drivers, including George's uncle, loved it for its blend of comfort, class, and raw power delivery on the tarmac. But I am not sure he still feels the same way about it, especially after watching it deteriorate through the years. Well, the good thing is, George is working overtime to reverse the damage, and if he succeeds, this Range Rover Vogue SE will be completely reborn. Right about now, he's tackling the front section as hard as he can. And at the end of it all, the lights came on. The biggest indication yet that this vehicle was edging really close to hitting the road again. I mean, all that was left was some basic installations. And once those were fixed, it was showtime. George had spent 3 years of his life on this project. That's over 1,000 days of sweat, late nights, and trial and error, not to mention the limited tools, experience, and skill set. Yet, against all odds, he pulled it off. I really don't know how he did it, but the outcome is epic. It shows that with the right determination, anything is possible. Which part of the restoration did you enjoy the most, and how would you rate George's restoration skill? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to check out other restoration videos on the channel.